So, Grenfell, the future. Mark Anthony, an editor of DemolitionNews.com. Hi, I'll be right with you, Mark. That will be very interesting. Michael in Shepherd's Bush, a stone's throw away, Michael.
Very well, thank you, Nicky. And I do remember the day when I first heard about Grenfell on the radio, and then from my house I could watch it burn, and the helicopters over and everything overhead. I very strongly feel that the tower should be kept, not just for the memorial of the families who've lost so much, but a memorial to a permanent reminder to us all of what happens if you let standards slip, as the local and national local authorities did. Taking it down to a nice little memorial garden would be nice. But as long as you can continue to see it from the road and it's sitting there, and as long as you're going on the tube as it's sitting there, as the lady said earlier, it's a permanent reminder to us that this must not be allowed to happen again. They're still not addressing the cladding issues still outstanding, or it's having difficulty with it. But once it's brushed under the carpet, for a nice little memorial garden, people will say, "Wasn't that nice? We can forget about it now and go away."
My emotional response is to kind of agree with you, because, as I said earlier on, driving past it, it kind of affects your whole journey wherever you're going when you see it. I understand what you're saying. I wonder about the practical implications. We'll speak to Mark about that in a second. But that morning must have been, watching it for you. Oh my God, what was that like from your window?
I wasn't. I mean, I could see it, and one was obviously horrified. But you could just see the flames.
Yeah.
But with you heard it on the radio. I wasn't close enough to be emotionally involved, sadly. But before going on to the comment I was going to make about the construction, yes, it's maybe not safe, but keep it upright and keep it safe as a memorial. Okay, it may be unsafe now, I accept that, and for very good reasons. But it should be maintained as made safe to make sure that it can stay as a memorial, as you both just agreed, was a very good emotional point to keep people's, we mustn't let that happen again.
Mark Anthony, listening to Michael, listening to others. Hi, Mark, editor of DemolitionNews.com. And I know you're a journalist, but you're not a demolisher yourself. But you know the subject. There's going to be huge scrutiny about this. What are the practicalities of it, Mark?
Practicalities wise, it's a tower block, and tower blocks are being taken down up and down the country, as on a regular basis. No problem with that whatsoever. We are quite fortunate, I think, in the UK. It's one of the few areas where we're still a world leader. We have some absolutely elite level demolition contractors in the UK. So the actual practicalities of it is all in a day's work for them.
What about the practicalities of not taking it down?
I've got to be honest with you. I was kind of sat on the fence with this, but I do applaud Angela Rayner's decision. Buildings like this don't improve with age, particularly after they've been damaged by fire. And I do appreciate the emotional impact on the bereaved families, but I do think she's made the right decision. And going back to your previous caller, I think a suitable memorial to them is to improve the standards that allowed this to happen in the first place.
Yeah. What's the process of taking it down? How would it be done? Because we all know those photographs of films of buildings collapsing and stuff like that when they're taken down. But how would this happen?
Given the fact that this is in the centre of London, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be done by explosive demolition. You've basically got two remaining options. Then you either put a crane in and you lower smaller machines onto the top and it munches it down piece by piece, or more likely they'll bring in what they call a high-reach excavator, which looks like a dinosaur, for want of a better term, that will stand on the ground beside and munch it down from ground level.
Well, how long would it take?
Under normal circumstances, you're probably looking about a week per floor. But given the sensitivity of this, also the fact that we don't know the actual integrity of the building as well, there will have been fire damage, there may well have been water damage, and we've had almost 8 years of it just sat there doing nothing. So I think it will be a lot slower than that.
John's with us as well in North London, lived in Ladbroke Grove at the time, same neighbourhood. Hello, John. What's your point this morning?
Yeah, good morning. I remember waking up and seeing Grenfell and hearing the news kind of in the way that we all did, and kind of absorbing that tragedy, on the ground locally and what that meant. But as an American, as I'm sure you've worked out, I also grew up in, outside of New York City and remember, as we all do, 9/11 and kind of what happened there with that building coming down, the speed with which it was kind of cleaned up, the way, the beauty now that memorial that lives for 9/11 and the surviving families, the impact that's had on the local area. And now next door is the tallest building in North America. And so kind of contrasting that response to what's happened in the last 7 years with Grenfell, I kind of am surprised, and I understand that people must be made held accountable, but for that building to still be there is this black eye on West London and to the families, and this really painful reminder of what happened. And I understand that closure is not, may never be an option, but progress is a necessity, and I don't think progress can be made so long as that building is still staring people hanging over their head.
A painful reminder for sure, but a necessary reminder for the rest of us?
I think that's a little grandiose to think that because we see a tall building with a green heart on it when we drive past it on the Westway, that we will be kicked into action to bring building standards in line with modern expectations. Mm-hmm. Like, that work needs to be done regardless. We don't need that physical reminder. And more to the point, I think the good that it may do to remind some people on a day-to-day is vastly outweighed by the pain it causes. Whether people realize it or appreciate it or not, it's a negative. It's a net negative in the city and I think collectively.
Interesting point. Let me bring you back in, Mark, editor of DemolitionNews.com. As and when and if it does happen, there will be such a solemn task. There will be massive scrutiny on the demolition contractors, won't there? Pictures of how they are conducting themselves, everything. You can almost imagine the press stories that might come out. But that's going to be quite a focus, Mark, isn't it?
It is going to be a focus. I mean, I actually wrote something about 3 weeks ago questioning who would actually want the contract. It's very easy to look at it, obviously, and I think you're right to look at it from the side of the bereaved families and the media scrutiny, but there's also the concern about the demolition workers themselves. We're going to be asking them to go and work in a place where 72 people perished unnecessarily, which, is likely to have an impact on those. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the demolition contractor that actually gets the contract to bring it down had to put in place some sort of counselling program to support its workers, because it is such an emotionally charged project to take on.
Must have been the same with 9/11, John. It's a fitting memorial there now. It's a very beautiful place. Lucky enough to have been there. But for those who did the work, there must have been a similar maelstrom of emotions, John.
Almost certainly. And I think, right to acknowledge that. I don't know if anything changes, right? We're talking about keeping it up so people can continue to feel the emotions. And then we can similarly contrast that with the challenges about bringing it down, because people will also feel those emotions. I think the reality is it is a tragedy in the truest sense. So that much is a given. We now need to think about what I think we've always needed to think about, how to move forward.
We have got Mushtaq Lashari as well, who's been talking about this today, local resident, chairman of Lancaster West Estate Residents Association, which surrounds Grenfell. Your thoughts, Mushtaq? Good morning. Tell us what your...
Good morning. Can I start with agreeing with John that it is a very difficult decision, but as I know, in 2019, the structural engineer gave a report that it need to be propped up, and it was propped up in 2020. But they also said that it need to be taken out. It is not safe because the buildings who are burned like this, and I was here on the night, as you remember, 14th of June 2014, I live about 40 yards from it. I was a local councillor and a deputy mayor, so I knew everybody who was in the block because I have campaigned it many times. I think.
Can I ask you what happened that night? How did your particular night progress?
I was just sitting in front of TV because that was just 6 days after our election, where I was supporting Labour Party and we had a hung parliament. So when I heard the noise outside, people shouting and running in between blocks where I live in Chesterton Walk. There is a Brendan Walk, Hurstway Walk, and they were shouting, "Fire, fire!" So I came out and I saw debris falling in my balcony, and my wife, my 2 grandchildren and family was sleeping here. So I woke them up, and then we went out and stood in front of the tower where there was a fire brigade, the police, and everybody was shouting. People were on the phone with their loved one who were on the top of the tower. So I think it was a very traumatic. We saw it from a very small fire within few minutes, a whole building on fire like a firebomb. So it was a very tragic and very traumatic, and it still reminds me when I come out, and as I said, I live 40 yards. My grandchildren have now grown up. They were 3, now they are 11-year-old. I think my thoughts.
What's it like living in the shadow of it now?
Oh, it is very difficult. It is always reminds us. A lot of people are going through psychiatrists and psychologists treatments. My grandchildren, whenever I ask them to draw something, they always draw fire. So, I believe the people who live around is a reminder. I welcome the decision. I am very happy that at last this government has taken this decision. Previous government didn't. I know that, as I said, in 2019, 2020, there were specialist reports, and they all said that structurally this is so much damaged, it cannot remain here.
I understand your position, Mushtaq, and you've been saying it with great power and passion on the media this morning. Forgive me, I want to bring in Chris in. That was incredibly powerful. I want to bring Chris in Warrington in, a Hillsborough survivor. So what are your words this morning, Chris? And thank you.
Well, I've been listening to this morning, and I think if the building's unsafe, it needs to come down. But if it needs to come down, it needs to be replaced by something. There needs to be a monument there. I'm up in the northwest, but I have driven past Grenfell, and I remember the first time I went past, and it's breathtaking. And once you realise what it is, and you think, "Oh my God, that's the Grenfell Tower."
Totally.
It makes you think. It makes you think. And I think something, if it does need to come down, it needs to be replaced by something that is as big and as striking as the tower. For all the people, like the Hillsborough people, like the Grenfell people, even the Royal Mail scandal recently, there's the tainted blood scandal, all these people who've been affected, because it's about, I don't know, your researcher called it state failure, and it makes people think about, where the state's gone wrong, and it just makes people think, really.
Mushtaq, what sort of a memorial would you like to see there 40 yards from where you live?
I think everybody agrees, majority of the residents who live around and who were living before and after and at that time of the tragedy, I think they are all minded to have some sort of memorial garden. We can learn it from 9/11, how they dealt with it, and many other areas where they had the disaster like that. So a memorial garden with trees, you can have 72 trees, and they can be named on these. And I have a lot of sympathy with the bereaved survivor and relatives. But I think they don't live around here. There is a very small minority of them which live in Lancaster West Estate, which is surrounding Grenfell Tower. And then there is a next door Kensington Aldrich Academy, which children come to get education. There is a KLC, Kensington Leisure Centre. So people who go for their swimming or anything, they can see it. So I think it is a tower which is unsafe. It is reminder of us who lived around and are living around of a tragedy and failure of the center and local government. So we will campaign for a memorial garden or some sort of thing, but it should not become a tourist attraction.
Oh yeah, okay. Listen, we'll leave it on that thought. Thank you, and thanks, Chris, and thank you, all of you, and may those all those people rest in peace.